Ladies and gentlemen, in a world brimming with constant noise, chatter, demands, expectations, it is often believed that to succeed, we must speak loudest, assert ourselves the most, and fill the air with our presence. Yet today, I ask you to consider a different path. A path where the greatest strength lies not in what is spoken, but in what is not. Say nothing, win everything. First, let us reflect on the power of silence in communication. We are taught from a young age that words are the vessels of meaning, that to be understood we must speak. And yet, there is an ancient truth that whispers through the silence. In the spaces between our words, there is a deeper understanding. In the pauses, the silences, the moments where we choose not to speak, others are invited to project themselves. Think of this. When we speak too much, we sometimes close the door to what others might offer, what they may reveal about themselves and the world around us. But when we say nothing, we open the door. We allow the unconscious mind to take the lead, where true communication can happen not through the limits of language, but through the quiet resonance of being. It is in those moments of silence that we truly understand what is being said, even when no words are spoken. Next, consider the strength found in restraint. In our society, to act is often equated with talking, with doing, with taking action. But what if restraint, the deliberate choice to say nothing, was itself the greatest form of power? To say nothing is not to be passive. It is not a withdrawal into indifference, but a conscious choice to resist the impulse to react, to respond immediately. In silence, we are not weak. Rather, we are strong enough to wait, to observe, to align ourselves with a deeper sense of truth. And in this stillness, we find clarity. For when we silence the noise, we allow our inner wisdom to speak louder than any external force. Finally, there is the subtle art of influence through presence. Often we think that to influence others we must be vocal, present, and assertive. But in reality, some of the most influential figures in history have been those whose presence spoke volumes without a single word. The great leaders, the quiet innovators, the masters of their craft, they understood that true influence is not about overpowering others with words, but about being present in a way that allows others to find their own truth, their own direction. When you say nothing, you allow others to hear themselves. You invite them into a space where their own thoughts, emotions, and truths can emerge without being clouded by your own voice. It is not the force of your words that influences, but the strength of your silence. And in that silence, the world listens, not to what you say, but to what you don't. So, I urge you to consider the power of restraint. Recognize that not every moment requires a response, and not every silence is an absence. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from what we say, but from the quiet mastery of knowing when to say nothing at all. Say nothing, and you might just win everything. Silence is often regarded as an absence, something that is simply the lack of sound or speech. However, in many ways, it is far more than that. Silence carries with it immense potential, a space where meaning, emotion, and understanding can transcend the boundaries of spoken language. It is in the quiet, the pause, the unsaid, that some of the deepest connections and most profound truths emerge. To say nothing may seem passive, but in truth, it can be the most active and powerful form of communication. In our world today, the act of speaking is so deeply ingrained in our social interactions that we rarely stop to think about the power of silence. We are conditioned from a young age to express ourselves, to make our thoughts known, to share our feelings and ideas in words. We are taught that communication happens when we speak, that it is through our vocal expression that we are truly heard and understood. In a world that values extroversion, action, and visible achievements, silence can feel like a form of absence, a gap, a void. But in fact, silence is not an absence at all. It is a powerful presence, one that has the potential to influence, to communicate, and to connect in ways that words alone cannot. The first thing to understand about silence is that it is not merely the lack of sound. Silence is an active space, a container for thought, a canvas upon which meaning can be painted. It is within this space that some of the most profound interactions occur, not through what is said, but through the very act of not speaking. When we say nothing, we create an opportunity for something greater to unfold. In silence, we can listen more deeply, not just with our ears, but with our hearts and minds. We can hear what is not being said, feel what is not being expressed, and understand what is not immediately obvious. There is a depth to human communication that goes beyond words, one that is rooted in the nonverbal and the unconscious. Much of our communication happens through body language, facial expressions, gestures, and even the tone and rhythm of our voice. These cues often carry more weight than the words themselves. When we remain silent, we allow these nonverbal signals to take center stage. We make space for others to communicate in ways they may not even realize they are doing. Silence, then, becomes a mirror, reflecting not just what is said, but also what is felt, what is desired, and what is feared. Silence also has a way of revealing the truth. In a conversation, when one person speaks incessantly, the listener may be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of words. In such a scenario, the real message may be obscured by the noise. But when silence enters the equation, things shift. Silence forces both the speaker and the listener to engage on a deeper level. The speaker, aware of the quiet, may become more intentional in their words. The listener, freed from the pressure of immediate response, may begin to process and reflect, uncovering layers of meaning that were not immediately apparent. Silence allows for a kind of introspection, a space where deeper truths can surface, truths that might have been overlooked in the rush of conversation. One of the most remarkable aspects of silence is its ability to draw out the unconscious mind. Humans are not just conscious beings. We are also deeply unconscious creatures, driven by desires, fears, and instincts that we are not always fully aware of. When we speak, we often filter our words through the lens of social norms, expectations, and logic. We shape our speech to fit the moment, to align with the ideas of others, or to satisfy our own insecurities. But when we say nothing, we remove this filter. We give ourselves, and those around us, the space to reflect on what lies beneath the surface. Silence brings to the forefront those thoughts, feelings, and motivations that are often buried beneath our conscious awareness. It forces us to confront the unspoken, to acknowledge what is hidden, and to reckon with the parts of ourselves that are not easily expressed. In this way, silence becomes a powerful tool for self-awareness and understanding. By holding space for silence, we allow our inner world to be revealed, not through words, but through the raw and unfiltered expression of our being. Silence allows us to listen not just to others, but to ourselves. It gives us the opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to connect with our own deeper truths. In this sense, saying nothing can be the most powerful form of communication we can engage in, as it invites us into a space of honesty, vulnerability, and authenticity. At the same time, silence is not only about introspection, it is also about connection. Often we believe that to connect with others, we must speak, share, and express ourselves. Yet, some of the deepest connections we form with others happen in the spaces between words. Think about a conversation with a close friend or loved one. Sometimes there is a moment where words become unnecessary, where a shared glance, a quiet smile, or a lingering pause carries more meaning than anything that could be said. It is in these moments of silence that true intimacy is forged. Silence allows us to communicate in ways that words cannot capture, through empathy, understanding, and a deep sense of shared experience. When we say nothing, we open ourselves up to the possibility of a different kind of connection, one that transcends the limitations of language and taps into something more fundamental, more human. Silence also invites space for others to project their own thoughts and feelings. In conversations, we often try to fill the air with our own ideas, opinions, and responses. But when we remain silent, we give others the opportunity to express themselves more freely. We give them the room to explore their own thoughts, to share their own stories, and to find their own voice. Silence can be a powerful catalyst for others to open up, to be heard, and to express themselves in ways they might not otherwise have done. In this way, silence becomes a form of generosity. It allows others to shine, to be the center of attention, and to feel truly understood. Furthermore, silence can be a form of influence. In many situations, the act of saying nothing can be far more powerful than speaking. When we are silent in the face of conflict or tension, for example, we disrupt the usual dynamics of power. We refuse to engage in the battle of words, and in doing so, we disarm the other person. Silence allows us to maintain control over the situation without resorting to force or confrontation. It is a way of asserting power not through aggression or dominance, but through calm, measured restraint. Silence, in this sense, becomes a subtle yet profound form of influence, a way of navigating the complexities of human interaction with grace and dignity. It is also important to note that silence is not always easy. In a world that values action and results, saying nothing can feel like a risky proposition. We are often conditioned to believe that if we are not speaking, we are not being heard, that if we are not asserting ourselves, we are being overlooked. But the power of silence lies precisely in its ability to transcend these fears and insecurities. It requires a certain level of confidence and self-assuredness to remain silent in a world that is constantly demanding our words. Yet, it is in this very act of restraint that we find a deeper sense of freedom, the freedom to be present without needing to prove anything, to listen without needing to respond, and to influence without needing to force. In a world that is constantly in motion, where action is highly valued and results are expected quickly, the notion of restraint may seem out of place. Yet it is precisely this quality, restraint, that offers us a powerful tool for achieving clarity, understanding, and ultimately success. Restraint is often misunderstood as passivity or weakness, a refusal to act or a hesitation to engage. However, in truth, restraint is a deliberate and conscious choice to refrain from responding impulsively, to take a step back and allow the moment to unfold at its own pace. The power of restraint lies not in the absence of action, but in the ability to control one's responses, to pause before acting, and to act only when it is most necessary and most effective. When we speak of restraint, we are referring to the ability to resist the immediate urge to react or respond to external stimuli. In a world filled with distractions and constant demands for our attention, it is all too easy to fall into the trap of reacting automatically, to become swept up in the current of emotions, thoughts, and pressures that surround us. The impulse to speak, to defend, to justify, or to act in the face of challenge is often overwhelming. Yet true power lies not in the quick response, but in the ability to resist that impulse, to pause, and to choose the best course of action, free from the influence of momentary emotions or external pressures. The concept of restraint requires a deep understanding of oneself. It is an internal discipline, a form of self-mastery that begins with awareness. The first step in practicing restraint is recognizing the urge to respond, to act, or to speak. Often we are driven by habitual patterns of behavior, reacting without thinking, speaking without considering the impact of our words, acting without assessing the consequences. These habits, though often ingrained, are not always aligned with our deepest values or our long-term goals. They may serve us in the short term, but they often create complications and unintended consequences in the long run. Restraint, in this context, is the practice of stepping back, of taking a moment to assess the situation and to determine the most thoughtful and deliberate course of action. One of the most powerful aspects of restraint is the clarity it provides. In the midst of turmoil, confusion, or emotional intensity, our thoughts can become clouded. We may feel compelled to speak out of anger, frustration, or fear, but when we choose to exercise restraint, we create the space needed to let the fog clear. The moment we pause, we allow ourselves to gain perspective. We stop reacting blindly and instead become more attuned to the deeper currents of the situation. This pause provides us with the opportunity to reflect on the true nature of the problem, to understand our own emotions, and to evaluate the best way to respond. In this way, restraint is not a denial of action, but a deliberate choice to act from a place of clarity rather than confusion. In the realm of communication, restraint has the remarkable ability to allow us to listen more deeply. Often, when we are in conversation, we are not truly listening to the other person. Instead, we are formulating our response, thinking about what we are going to say next, or preparing to defend our point of view. This dynamic can create a barrier to genuine understanding. When we practice restraint, however, we give ourselves the freedom to simply listen, without preparing an answer, without the desire to interject. In this silence, we open ourselves up to hearing not just the words of the other person, but also the underlying emotions, thoughts, and perspectives that they may be struggling to express. By restraining ourselves from speaking, we give the other person the space they need to share their truth fully. In turn, we create a more meaningful exchange, one that is grounded in genuine understanding, rather than in the mere exchange of information. Furthermore, restraint allows us to engage with situations and people with greater wisdom and precision. When we choose to hold back, we are not acting out of reactionary emotion, but out of careful consideration. This approach enables us to assess the situation more thoroughly, to weigh our options, and to make decisions that are more aligned with our values and long-term objectives. In many cases, the act of restraint becomes a form of strategic thinking. Instead of rushing to action or response, we take the time to gather information, to reflect on the potential consequences of our actions, and to consider how best to move forward. This ability to act with intention rather than impulse can make all the difference in achieving success, particularly in high-stakes or complex situations where a hasty response may lead to unintended consequences. Another significant benefit of restraint is the power it offers in maintaining emotional control. Emotions, while a natural and important part of being human, can often cloud our judgment and lead us to make decisions that we later regret. When we are in an emotionally charged situation, the urge to act impulsively can be overwhelming. Yet, by practicing restraint, we can avoid falling victim to emotional reactivity. Restraint allows us to step outside of the immediate emotional response and take a more objective view of the situation. By holding back and taking the time to process our emotions, we prevent them from dictating our actions. This emotional control not only leads to wiser decision-making, but also helps us to navigate conflict and tension more effectively. When we do respond, we do so from a place of calm and composure, which increases the likelihood of achieving a positive outcome. Restraint is also a key element in building and maintaining strong relationships. In interpersonal dynamics, particularly in moments of conflict or disagreement, our natural inclination may be to defend ourselves, to argue, or to try to prove our point. However, this often leads to escalation and deepens the divide between people. When we exercise restraint, we create the opportunity for healing and reconciliation. By holding back from reactive speech, we allow space for empathy and understanding to emerge. We demonstrate respect for the other person's perspective and create an environment in which both parties can express themselves without fear of judgment or hostility. Restraint in this sense becomes a tool for fostering connection and mutual respect. It enables us to approach difficult conversations with humility and grace, recognizing that sometimes the most powerful way to influence others is not through forceful words, but through quiet, measured presence. There is also an aspect of resilience tied to restraint. In challenging circumstances, the ability to hold back, to resist the temptation to react prematurely, demonstrates inner strength and fortitude. Resilience is not about never feeling emotional or never being affected by external events. Rather, it is about having the capacity to withstand those challenges and remain composed in the face of adversity. Restraint in this context is a manifestation of that resilience. It shows that we are not easily swayed by external pressures or emotional upheaval, but that we have the strength to remain grounded and steady. This quality of resilience is not only valuable for our own sense of inner peace and stability, but also has a positive impact on those around us. People are drawn to those who can remain calm under pressure, who can demonstrate composure even in difficult situations. In this way, restraint becomes an important aspect of leadership, influence, and personal integrity. Moreover, practicing restraint can lead to greater personal growth. It requires self-awareness, discipline, and the ability to delay gratification. In a society that often prioritizes immediate results and quick rewards, the ability to practice restraint is a countercultural act, a refusal to be governed by the need for instant validation or the desire for immediate answers. Restraint teaches us the value of patience and the long-term rewards that come from taking a measured approach, It encourages us to think beyond the immediate moment and to consider the bigger picture. This kind of thinking leads to personal development, greater emotional intelligence, and the ability to make more thoughtful and intentional choices. Restraint, in essence, is the art of knowing when not to act. It is the ability to hold back, to pause, and to consider the most effective course of action. Far from being a passive or weak stance, restraint is an active practice that requires tremendous inner strength, clarity, and wisdom. It is through restraint that we gain the clarity to make better decisions, the emotional control to navigate challenges, and the wisdom to act with intention rather than impulse. Restraint allows us to engage with the world in a way that is both strategic and thoughtful, and it is often through this careful balance of action and inaction that we achieve the most significant and lasting victories. The strength found in restraint is not just the strength of doing nothing, it is the strength of knowing exactly when to do nothing and when to act, and in this knowledge lies the key to true power. In the human experience, the art of influence is one of the most profound and elusive skills one can master. We often think of influence as something overt, something achieved through persuasion, forceful rhetoric, or the ability to command attention. Influence in the traditional sense is often associated with people who can speak well, act with authority, and dominate social spaces. Yet there is another form of influence, one that is subtle, quiet, and deeply rooted in presence rather than words. The subtle art of influence through presence is a form of communication that operates beneath the surface, impacting those around us without the need for forceful action or loud speech. It is the ability to shape outcomes, to guide others, and to leave a lasting impression without ever uttering a word. At the heart of influence through presence is the recognition that influence is not simply about what we say or do, but about who we are. Our presence, our energy, and our ability to exist authentically in the world often speak louder than anything we could say. This presence is not something that can be faked or forced. It is something that arises from the depth of our being. When we are truly present in the moment, when we are fully engaged and attuned to the world around us, we create an invisible force that subtly guides those around us. This presence allows us to influence not through exertion, but through calm, quiet confidence. A confidence that emanates from the authenticity of our being. There is a deep power in simply being present. When we are truly present in a space, we are no longer caught up in the noise of our own thoughts, anxieties, or distractions. We are fully engaged with the moment, open to the needs, emotions, and energy of those around us. It is in this state of attentiveness that we create an environment where others feel heard, seen, and understood. This state of presence is magnetic. People are naturally drawn to individuals who exude this level of grounded awareness. They are drawn to those who do not rush to speak, but who take the time to absorb what is happening around them. It is in this space of deep listening and quiet observation that true influence begins to take shape. To influence through presence is to understand that energy speaks louder than words. Our bodies, our posture, and our energy all convey messages far beyond our spoken language. When we walk into a room, we can either fill it with energy or allow it to take on its own momentum. Our body language, the way we carry ourselves, and the aura we project have an immediate and profound effect on the people around us. In fact, research has shown that a significant portion of communication is non-verbal. Our facial expressions, gestures, and overall body language communicate volumes, often more than the words we speak. By being mindful of our presence and how we carry ourselves, we can have an immense impact on those around us without needing to say a single word. A calm, confident demeanor can create a sense of reassurance in others, while a tense or hurried presence can create anxiety. It is through the subtle cues of our physical presence that we begin to influence the emotional tone of a room, the attitudes of those around us, and the way people respond to us. This influence through presence is particularly effective in leadership and social dynamics. Great leaders often influence not through the strength of their words alone, but through the way they show up in a room. They exude a quiet confidence, a sense of calm that inspires trust and respect. People are drawn to leaders who can be present without the need to assert their dominance or prove their worth. It is in the silence, in the moments when a leader is not speaking, that their true influence is felt. The ability to be fully present, to remain calm under pressure, and to listen deeply to others is what inspires loyalty, trust, and commitment. This type of leadership does not rely on constant verbal affirmation or persuasion. It relies on the ability to hold space, to allow others to find their own answers, and to create an environment where everyone feels heard and valued. The influence that comes from presence is also deeply tied to emotional intelligence. When we are fully present, we are able to attune ourselves to the emotional currents in the room. We can sense the mood of the group, the underlying tensions, and the unspoken needs of those around us. This heightened awareness allows us to respond in a way that is both thoughtful and compassionate. Rather than reacting impulsively or aggressively, we can choose to respond in a manner that diffuses tension and fosters understanding. By remaining present, we become more aware of the emotions of others, and in turn we can influence how those emotions evolve. We can calm a nervous group, inspire confidence in a hesitant individual, or provide comfort to someone in distress, all without uttering a single word. This level of emotional sensitivity is at the heart of influential leadership and interpersonal dynamics. The ability to influence others through our presence requires us to be in tune with their emotional states, to hold space for them, and to guide them in a way that feels natural and supportive. Moreover, influence through presence has the unique ability to create a sense of safety and trust. When we are truly present with others, we give them the gift of our full attention. In a world where people often feel ignored or overlooked, this attention can be transformative. To be fully present with someone is to show them that they matter, that their thoughts and feelings are valued. This simple act of being present can create a profound sense of connection, which in turn fosters trust. Trust is the foundation of all influence. Without trust, any attempt at persuasion or manipulation will fall flat. But when we build trust through presence, through our ability to listen deeply, to respond thoughtfully, and to remain calm in the face of uncertainty, we create the conditions necessary for lasting influence. There is also a quiet strength that comes with influence through presence. Often, the most powerful people in any room are those who do not need to constantly assert themselves or seek validation. Their strength lies in their ability to remain composed and centered, regardless of the circumstances. This strength is magnetic. It draws people in, not because they seek to dominate, but because they exude a quiet authority that commands respect. The ability to influence others through presence is rooted in this inner strength, the strength that comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and the confidence to remain true to yourself in any situation. This type of influence is not based on the need to control others, but on the ability to maintain your own equilibrium and create an environment where others can feel empowered and supported. When we speak about influence through presence, it is also important to understand that this form of influence is not dependent on force or manipulation. It is not about convincing others to do something against their will or convincing them of something they do not believe. Instead, influence through presence is about creating the conditions for others to come to their own conclusions, to find their own truth, and to act in a way that aligns with their own values. This type of influence is about setting an example, creating a space for others to grow, and offering them the freedom to make their own choices. It is not about pushing people in a particular direction, but rather about holding the space for them to discover their own path. The ability to influence through presence also requires patience. In our fast-paced world, where everything moves at a rapid pace, it is easy to become frustrated by the slow progress of change. However, true influence is often a gradual process. It requires time, consistency, and a willingness to trust that your presence will eventually have an impact. Influence through presence is not about immediate gratification or quick results. It is about building a foundation of trust, respect, and connection over time. The subtlety of this form of influence means that its effects may not always be immediately apparent, but over time, the impact becomes clear. In conclusion, the power of saying nothing, of choosing restraint, and of influencing through quiet presence cannot be overstated. In a world that constantly urges us to speak louder, act faster, and assert our dominance, we often overlook the profound strength that lies in silence, patience, and the subtle art of non-verbal influence. By embracing the power of silence, we create space for deeper understanding, clarity, and connection. Through restraint, we learn to act with intention, not impulse, gaining the wisdom and emotional control to navigate complex situations with grace. And by mastering the ability to influence through our presence, we become leaders who guide not by force, but by authenticity, empathy, and quiet strength. These practices, though understated, are far from passive. They are active choices that require self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and a deep understanding of the dynamics that shape human relationships. In choosing silence over speech, restraint over reaction, and presence over noise, we unlock the potential to engage with the world in a way that is both powerful and transformative. In the end, it is not always the loudest voice that wins the day, but the one that speaks most thoughtfully, most authentically, and most effectively. By embracing the art of saying nothing, we ultimately find that we can win everything: peace, connection, understanding, and influence, without ever needing to raise our voices.